We're going to give people just a few more minutes to kind of come in here. Pastor said to start about 5 after, but if you want to move up a little closer, it's kind of, I need binoculars to see some of you back there, so. Nobody's going to move. That's all right. But we'll give everybody just a couple more minutes to get in here before we get started. I see people coming through the doors. I was a research chemist and a computer programmer for a number of years. I have my name on several patents for drugs. And after that, I ran my own business for a long period of time. But I never walked away from science. I always was reading the current literature, looking at new findings, the latest things that were happening. But the most important thing is I'm a Christian. And I got to tell you, in the science community, they feel that to be a Christian and a scientist, you have to turn your mind off. That you can't think logically and be a Christian because they feel that their logic pushes all religion away. A few Sundays ago, we sang a song called Build My Life here in the sanctuary. And the lyrics from that song were, I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. And I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. But something has shaken the resolve of believers in the West. Because we can't deny it, the church in the West is declining. Our numbers are going down. The number of people available is going down. Pastor said last Sunday that there are so many churches without pastors now. The church is declining. Now, they did a study. They went out and they asked people who have left the church and now claim they're atheists, why? Why did you do that? And their answer was, because God is no longer needed. Science has explained everything, so faith in God is an old-fashioned superstition. I know we don't believe that, okay? But the problem is, a lot of people do. And the other problem is our children are being taught that all the time. The crazy thing is that science actually started from religion. Scientists or people that were inquisitive, like Sir Isaac Newton, actually thought by looking at nature and seeing how things occurred that they were finding out how God worked. The nature of God, to see his face. Well, a quote from Newton is, in studying how the world works, we are studying how God works, and thereby learning what God is. In that spirit, we can interpret the search for knowledge as a form of worship, and our discoveries as revelations. He also said, after eating from the tree of knowledge, all other fruit is not as sweet. So I want to know, how many people here think that there's a war going on right now between science and religion? Raise your hand. Most Christians feel that way, that there's something going on, that science is anti-religion. When did that start? Because science started from religion. It started with Darwin. When Darwin wrote his book on the origin of the species, there were a whole ton of books that came out after him that said, if you tried to stop Darwin, you were stopping science. And that science stood for freedom and progress against the superstition and repression of religion. Now, the problem with Darwin is he saw these little tiny changes in different birds and animals that happened over a relatively short period of time. And there are actually two forms of evolution. There is microevolution, which is those small changes, and then there's macroevolution, which is interspecies, a frog turning into a rabbit. That's macroevolution. But a bird developing a different beak to be able to eat certain seeds, that's microevolution. Microevolution is true. Horses used to only be this tall. Now they're this big. But they're still horses. That's microevolution. Now, when Darwin wrote his book, what did he know? At the time, they thought that the universe was a static construct. And that means that the universe and the earth always existed. There was no time frame around them. So they had an infinite amount of time for things to change. There was an infinite amount of time for macroevolution to happen, for that frog to become a rabbit. Also, Darwin knew that there were fossils being found that showed a huge diversity of life that had been on Earth. But he also knew that there were no interspecies fossils found. No fossils that showed a frog gradually becoming a rabbit. No interspecies fossils had been found. But he thought that as we looked and searched more and more, those interspecies fossils would be found. And he also, in his thing, said that evolution is a gradual process, very slow, step by step, over extremely long periods of time. Now, the first problem was Darwin's idea that the universe always existed. That is not true. We now know that the universe, according to science, is 13.8 billion years old. And one of the reasons we found out about that was a guy by the name of Hubble. You know, the Hubble telescope that's orbiting the Earth right now, it was named after him. And he started looking out in the universe, and he saw a thing called red shift. And now, all of us have experienced a thing called the Doppler Effect. You sit by the side of the road and you hear a guy blowing a horn, and as he comes closer, the pitch gets higher, and then as he goes away, the pitch gets lower. That's called the Doppler Effect. But that also happens with light, okay? If light is traveling farther away, if a light source is traveling away from us, the light will shift to the red side. If the light is traveling towards us, it'll shift to the blue side. So Hubble took a look at stars as far out as he could see them, or galaxies, and he saw a red shift to the light. Therefore, all that stuff is going away from us. Now, if it's all going away, if you just reverse that, at some time, it was closer and closer and closer. And they finally figured out, and Einstein was the one that did the equations, that at some point in time, the universe was one infinitely small, infinitely dense, infinitely hot spot. Now, Hubble also found out that not only was everything going away from us, it was also accelerating, going faster. Now, this whole idea that everything had a starting point, scientists did not like. So they came up with a whole bunch of fudge factors, I'll call them, to trying to cover their butts. One of them was that the universe cycled. So say, for instance, you blew up a firecracker and the pieces would fly up in the air at a pretty fast rate, then they would slow down and they would come back to Earth. Well, what they thought the universe was happening was after what they called the Big Bang happened, it exploded, the universe expanded, and then it was going to slow down and then slowly contract again and go back to that infinitely dense point. And that may have repeated who knows how many times. So again, they had an infinite amount of time for things to happen just by chance. But with Hubble saying that the galaxies in our universe are actually accelerating and going faster away from us, no, it can't do that. It can't come back. It's getting faster. Well, the problem with that whole idea of there being a infinitely dense, infinitely small point, and Einstein actually took it to the point where that infinitely dense, infinitely small, infinitely hot point was called a singularity. And it really means nothing. So everything came from nothing. Nothing. Now, you can't create something from nothing without there being someone to create it or something. Now, all that other forms of the universe, they even came up with an idea that matter is constantly being created, and it's replacing the gaps in the universe, and there's absolutely no proof for that. And one of the problems with this idea that everything went to this infinitely dense little tiny small spot is at that point science stops. They've got no idea what it was before that. They really don't have any idea what happened then and what made it happen. And there's a law of thermodynamics that says that matter and energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared. Everybody remember that? Energy and matter are related, but they can neither be created or destroyed. All the energy that's in the universe was there at the Big Bang. All the matter that was there at the Big Bang. Can't be created, can't be destroyed. Problem? How do you get something from nothing? How does that occur? There's another problem. At that point where everything burst into existence, that Big Bang, there was a whole series of preset, I'll call them dials, that were set at the Big Bang to lead to the creation of life. They had to be preset. So who set all that? If the universe was preset to create life, someone or something or some intelligence had to preset it. It is, back in the 60s, Carl Sagan made a comment that said, you only need two things for there to be life in the universe, and that's the sun of the proper size and a planet the right distance from the sun. Two things. That was in the 60s. And if you do the equation with so many billions and billions of stars and the possibility of planets around all the stars, he postulated that there were probably millions of planets that had life on it. Well, since Carl Sagan in the 60s, scientists have found out there are over 260 requirements for there to be life. In other words, there is a gigantic radio with 260 dials on it that you have to set absolutely perfectly to get your radio station. Now, you can't change one dial and then readjust the others and still get your station. If one dial is out of whack, no life. Now, the possibility of that happening by mere chance is 1 in a trillion. In other words, ain't going to happen. And that when they did the probability of life in the universe, you know what it was? Less than 0. That means we shouldn't be here. We shouldn't be here. Science has worked so hard to try and find natural explanations and postulate how theories work. They come up with theories for something that they see happening. What happens, though, is if they can find exceptions to the theory or things that disprove the theory, then they have to come up with a new theory. When it comes to the Big Bang and the start of the universe, there's so much evidence that there was design put into that starting point that scientists just resist the idea of saying that there was intelligent design put in it. They will come up with any word other than that. There's a rule in science that's called Occam's razor. It says if you're trying to explain something, the simplest explanation is usually the correct one. Well, they've come up with such complicated try to explain the start of the universe, the Big Bang, to try and get away from the idea that there was intelligent design involved in the start of everything, that it's getting to the point of ridiculousness. But they just don't want to say it. Now, why is the fact that the universe was preloaded with information at the Big Bang, and that design was led to bring about life? If you think about that, that means not only was there intelligent design, it was benevolent intelligence. So this whole idea of not having a discussion, at least, about there being intelligent design in the starting of the universe is much more political than it is scientific. As soon as anyone, any scientist, tries to even open the discussion about there being intelligent design, they lose their job in the university, they lose their tenure, they get blackballed. There's a wonderful movie out, and I urge everyone to go see it. It's by a guy by the name of Ben Stein, a Jewish fella. It's called Expelled. And he's talking about what happens to scientists who just even hint at the idea that there's intelligent design behind the creation of the universe. Now, some other problems. When Hubble said that the universe is expanding and accelerating in its expansion, that can't happen unless there's some energy behind it, something pushing it. So the scientists call that energy dark energy. They know it's there. They know the effect it's having on the universe, making everything accelerate, but they have no way of testing it, looking at it, knowing what it is. All they can do is name it. They could call it purple people eater if you want, but it doesn't make it anything different. It's just a mystery to them. But they know it's there because of the effect it's having on the universe. Why do we know God exists? Because the effect he has on us. It seems kind of contradictory. Now, there's another issue. When they looked at the creation of solar systems like ours, there's not enough matter in our solar system to create the gravity necessary to condense that big gaseous cloud that happened at the Big Bang into planets and stars. There's not enough matter to create the gravity. So they came up with a beautiful new name for this mysterious matter that had to be there. It's called dark matter. Not much imagination, but that's what they call it. And again, have not been able to test for it, haven't been able to figure out what it is, have never had any reaction to it other than they know it has to be there. Dark matter, dark energy. And the crazy thing is that dark matter and dark energy make up 95 to 98% of our universe. So what we see, our planets, our stars, are only 2 to 5% of the universe that we see. So if someone comes to you and says, "Oh, I'm not going to believe in God because science has explained everything." Sorry, buddy. Science can only tell you about the behavior of 2 to 5% of the universe. The rest of it, they know nothing about, and they don't have any idea how the 2 to 5% ever came into existence. So this idea that I'm not going to believe in God because science has explained everything is totally wrong. And I want to arm you with some information so that if you're talking to somebody like this, and especially your children, because you're going to hear this, they're going to come back from school with this Darwin's evolution, and evolution is it, and everything is the way it is. One of the great things that they found out about this dark energy is that it's everywhere. It's in this room right now. It penetrates everything. And it holds our atoms, our very atoms, together. Now, that sounds to me like a verse out of the Bible, Colossians 1:17, when Paul says, in him all things are held together. And then dark matter is responsible for the formation of galaxies and stars and solar systems. And that sounds like Isaiah 40:26 that says, lift up your eyes on high and see who has created these stars, the one who leads forth their hosts by number. He calls them by name. Because of the greatness of his might and strength and his power, none of them is missing. Now, I'm not saying that dark energy or dark matter is God, but it sure looks like they're God's power. They're evidence of an intelligent power controlling our universe. Now, no scientist will ever say that they can prove or disprove the existence of God. But the evidence is much heavier on the side of intelligent design and God's involvement in the universe than it is on random chance. Now, one of the next steps is now Darwin's been stopped in his tracks because now there's a time frame to the creation of the universe, 13.8 billion years for the universe, and somewhere between 4.2 and 3.8 billion years for the time that Earth has existed. Darwin didn't know that. Maybe he would have changed his book a little bit if he knew that. The other thing he didn't know about was DNA. There was a couple of fellows, Crick and Watson, who discovered the double helix, the structure of a DNA. And even Crick said that when looking at this, it was totally miraculous. At first they thought that this DNA, which is made up of 20 amino acids in pairs in this twisted spiral that I'm sure you've all seen illustrated somewhere, they thought that there was some natural affinity, that if you took the 20 amino acids, put them in a jug and shook it enough, you'd end up getting a DNA. In fact, back in the 50s, they took what they said was the copy of the primordial soup that was here on Earth, and they hit it with artificial electricity. And when they went in and looked at it, they found some amino acids. And right away they said, look, there, it's proof that DNA can be just made by random chance. Well, here's the problem. If a stone fell off a cliff shaped like a brick, would that mean that the Empire State Building could self-assemble itself? It doesn't work that way. And also, the scientists end up not reproducing the primordial soup. They actually fudged the whole thing. They knew what it took to create the amino acids, and they put that in their concoction to start with, and it wasn't even close to the primordial soup. But I guarantee you, every science book that your children are learning from in school right now has that in there saying that DNA can come from random chance. The idea that things can just happen by random chance is just been disproven over and over and over again. The whole idea that these amino acids can just somehow self-assemble doesn't work. And one of the quotes I have here is, even if every event in the entire history of the universe, where an event is defined as minimally as an interaction between elemental particles, was devoted to producing a combination of amino acids of a given length and extravagantly generous assumption, the number of combinations thus produced would still represent only a tiny portion, less than 1/trillionth of a trillionth of the possible combinations. Let's put it a different way. Since the dawn of the earth, when life started here, how many generations of life were there? And they kind of figured that out as 10 to the 40th. That's 10 with 40 zeros after it. That's how many generations of life. So each time there's a new generation, there's a possibility of a mutation in the DNA. But if you took the shortest DNA there is, which is 150 pairs of amino acids, and looked at the possible combinations with 150 different pairs, it's 10 to the 150th possible combinations. You only had 10 to the 40th generations, and there's, just for a simple DNA, it's 10 to the 50th. And there's only 2 possible combinations out of that 10 to the 150th that even do anything. So I want to show you one of the biggest problems with Darwin's theory of evolution. And I'm sure you're all familiar with this. Biggest problem with Darwin's theory of evolution: the rat trap. Now, I know that sounds silly, right? But what this is an irreducible structure. In other words, if you took one part of this away, rat trap wouldn't work. If you took the spring out, rat trap wouldn't catch rats. You took the lever out, no rats. You took the little trigger out, no rats. It's irreducible. It's got to be this way for it to work. This is the problem with DNA. DNA is irreducible. It's got to be at a certain set of amino acid pairs to do anything. And it gets even worse because when you go from the DNA to the single cell organism that supposedly started life, that single cell organism is an irreducible structure. For evolution to work, that single cell organism had to come about slowly. There had to be like a membrane maybe made and a little filament that goes here, but it doesn't work that way. If you take one little piece away from a single cell organism, it's gone. You take one little fibery hair that is on the outside away, it's gone. It doesn't work. It's an irreducible structure. How you can get that through evolution has been proven just impossible. So, and then DNA itself, as I said, the simplest one is 150 pairs, 150, 10 to the 150th possible combinations of 20 amino acids. How do you get that in the time frame that we have? Even if you took the time for the whole universe, 13.8 billion years, and said, just by randomly coming together, could we get a DNA that would work? Not enough time. Not even close. And the age of the earth even makes it even more impossible. It just can't happen. I love this quote from Bill Gates. It says, DNA's processing system is an advanced form of nanotechnology that both mirrors and exceeds our own in its complexity, design, logic, and information storage density. So this whole idea that life spontaneously appeared on Earth is impossible. There had to be some intelligence behind it. Now, I said when the Big Bang occurred, there was this whole set of preset factors that were leading to life. When you look at Earth, the number of preset factors on Earth goes up exponentially. And again, can't have happened by random chance. The chances are just almost impossible. This whole idea that the DNA is almost a computer program. Now, computer programs are binary. They're ones and zeros. Now, an amino acid is pairs, but it's 20 different amino acids. So it's infinitely more complicated than a computer program. In fact, Bill Gates has said it's the most complicated computer program ever written and need intelligence to create it. Now, I'm pointing out all these things that are saying that it was impossible for all this stuff to happen just by random chance. But what scientists say is I'm pointing out God in the gaps. In other words, I'm saying God is filling in the gaps where science hasn't figured it out yet. Well, here's the problem. The more science looks at those gaps, instead of closing them, they're getting bigger and bigger. The whole idea for a non-believer to say that everything happened just by random chance and we don't need God is just wrong. Now, again, Darwin, one of the things that Darwin was looking at was the fossil record. And he said he saw the variety of life that was created. And again, for evolution to be correct, it has to go slowly from one form to another. And one of the biggest problems is a thing called the Cambrian Explosion. On Earth, within a relatively short period of time for biology, within a 10 million year period, every single form of life on Earth appeared. Bang. And we can find the fossil record of the Cambrian explosion, but there is no precursors. There's none of this, it went from a single cell to this, to this, to this. There was all these single cells, and then all of a sudden, all life was here. Sounds more like the Bible to me, doesn't it? It really does. Our Bible gives so much stronger explanation for what happened on Earth than evolution ever could. And the amount of information necessary to create a new form of life is infinitely higher than that 150 pair DNA I was talking about. You need lots of DNA. You need much more complicated. And then for there to be changes, dramatic changes, you'd have to have dramatic changes in that DNA. So, who's winning the war between science and God? If we look at our secular world around us, you'd think science was winning because nobody is standing up to them. Nobody is pointing out the truth. Nobody is pointing to God. If you look at the evidence that science has been finding, it not only makes God all-powerful, it makes him even more powerful than we can imagine. Now, what's happened is that evolution is no longer science. Evolution has turned into a religion. So what we're fighting now is one religion against another religion. And one of the biggest problems is as soon as you try to introduce intelligent design into a school system, they say you're doing a backhanded way of introducing God into the school system. And according to the separation of church and state, we're not supposed to teach God in the school system. Well, I don't know about you, but the clause in the Constitution that says that they are using a separation of church and state actually says that the government is not supposed to be involved in religion, not religion involved in government. And they have twisted that. Now, again, I talked about Ben Stein's movie Expelled, and again, I encourage everybody. I think it's on Netflix right now to see that. It's wonderful. But all is not lost by any means. Scientists are slowly, gradually coming forward and saying that there's something behind this. There's intelligent design behind this. They had a conference at MIT, and two very famous scientists, like Dr. Kenyon and Dr. Sandberg, came up on the stage. And what they did was they set one side of the stage up as the secular side and one side as the theistic side. And they were going to have a debate about, is everything created by random chance, or is there intelligent design? And these two guys had written papers supporting random chance. But as they walked up on the stage, they sat down on the theistic side, which caused a rumble to run through the auditorium. And they both got up to the podium, and what they said was neither wanted to claim that their discoveries proved the existence of God. They cautioned that science can't prove anything with absolute certainty. Both argued, however, that discovery seemed to fit much better with a theistic perspective than a materialistic one. Professor Sandberg caused a stir at the conference just by sitting down on the theistic side. And it turns out he had been a lifelong atheist. And through his research, embraced faith in God because he couldn't deny intelligent design. He said he had done so because the evidence was there in spite of his strong belief against it. And then Dr. Kenyon explained at the conference that he had come to doubt his own theories. Origin of life and simulation experiments increasingly suggested that simple chemicals do not arrange themselves into complex information-bearing molecules. They do not move into life-relevant directions unless a biochemist sets it up, an intelligence behind it. Professor Sandberg was one of the great observational astronomers of the 20th century, and he said, I now have come from a stance as a complete materialistic, rational scientist and say this supernatural event to me gives at least some credence to my belief that there is some design put in the universe. I cannot with certainty say that now I do. I am convinced that there is some order in the universe. I think all scientists at the deepest levels are so startled by what they see in the miraculousness of the interconnection of things in their field that they at least wonder why it is this way. The whole idea that our world, our life, our existence came about by random chance is just impossible. The statistics, their own mathematics, says it's impossible. The universe couldn't have come into existence. One of the things, again, with the Big Bang that they found was when they were looking for proof that the Big Bang happened, they found what they call the echo of the Big Bang. It's this radiation field that just permeates the universe. And that really sealed the idea that there was a beginning. But one other thing they found was that the universe is supposed to be 13.8 billion years old. But if you were to travel at the speed of light, it would take you 93 billion years to travel from one side to the other. Now, if the speed of light is the speed limit of the universe, how could the universe be bigger than the age that it is? Unless there was a gigantic, benevolent creator involved in this that did something that was impossible for science. Again, there are so many scientific findings that are proving what the Bible says. And this is just an aside to kind of give you a little information. Our Bible talks about Adam and Eve. And science has just poo-pooed that whole idea that we have supposedly evolved from monkeys. Well, a bunch of scientists were looking at a group of turtles on an island. And one of the scientists said, I wonder if all these turtles are related. So they took blood samples from a large population of the turtles, and they found out that there is a piece of the DNA that is only inherited from the female, from the mother, the maternal DNA piece. And they found out that every turtle on that island came from one female. Some female randomly got blown up on that island, laid her eggs, and started the whole process, and now all the turtles on that island came from that one female. Well, then they thought, well, I wonder if humans have that same DNA marker. And they looked, and we do. So they decided to go and take blood samples from every single race on Earth, expecting to find that every race would have a different female as a mother. And when they looked at it, they found that every single race on the face of the earth came from one female, Eve. Okay? Now, the crazy thing is they can look at how many generations it's been since Eve. And they figured out that in time frame, it's about 190 to 200,000 years since Eve. Now, if we look at the genealogy in the Bible from Adam to Jesus and look at the time frame for the lifespans, you know how long it is? Between 190 and 200,000 years. And one of the crazy things, they tried to explain this, is they said, there wasn't just one female. There were lots of females. But the other females never had a female offspring. And now I see laughter out there. That's impossible. Okay? Now, if there was an Eve, there was obviously an Adam. But science just does not want to put credence to what the Bible says. I've given you a lot of information, and I want to take time to answer any questions you may have, or something even totally off subject that you have a question about that maybe I can help you with an answer. But does anyone have any questions? I hope you do. Please have something. Go ahead. Well, here's the issue. Where did the dinosaurs come from? They came from that Cambrian explosion. All life came in a very short period of time. They didn't evolve to dinosaurs. They just appeared. Okay? And they disappeared because a big meteor hit the earth and sent clouds of dust all over and froze the earth for a while. But mammals were still there when the dinosaurs were there. But dinosaurs are more than 200,000 years ago. So were us as Homo sapiens on the planet when dinosaurs were there? No, we were not. Now I watched a Will Smith program, and it was called This Strange Earth. And he started the program with, "We'll probably never know how life began," which I thought, great. At least they're admitting that, okay? But they spent an hour and a half trying to convince you that everything came about by pure random chance. Then I watched another program on nature where they showed the evolution of humans. And they have these fossils of ape-like creatures that they say are precursors to humans. And they trace those fossils all the way through till they get to Neanderthal man. And they got to Neanderthal. And then if you look in your children's textbooks, there's a little diagram in there. I guarantee it's in every one of them. And it shows that little monkey, and he gets more and more upright, and he goes through, and then there's Neanderthal man, and then there's Homo sapien. Well, about 11 years ago, they found a Neanderthal bone in a cave that wasn't fossilized. It was preserved. And they were able to extract the DNA from that bone. And they found that we are not related to Neanderthal at all. Neanderthal didn't evolve into Homo sapiens. One of the biggest problems was Homo sapiens and Neanderthals existed at the same exact time. And that doesn't happen according to evolution. Now, there may have been some interbreeding between Neanderthal and Homo sapien, but we are not evolved. And the comment they made just threw me away. They said, well, we haven't found the fossil chain that leads to Homo sapien yet. Now, they've been looking for over 200 years, and they found this fossil chain that leads to Neanderthal and then ends. And all of a sudden, Homo sapien is on the earth 200,000 years ago from one female. It sounds much more like the Bible than anything else. And one of the things, we as Christians, we tend to take a back seat when people are talking about evolution and science and things like that. We just let them talk. And we can't keep doing that. We have to. I had a mother come to me child was being taught evolution in school, and she said, "What can I do about this?" And I said, "Just ask your daughter to ask the teacher to show her the fossils, because there are none." And the teacher had to admit that. There's no interspecies fossils. They just don't exist. I mean, I didn't admit that there was intelligent design involved, but at least it stopped the teacher in her tracks. We have let government and school boards and that dictate what our children are being taught. Even if we don't stop that in school, we need to take the time to teach our children the truth about what science is finding out. The truth that science is pointing much, much more towards intelligent design and there being a creator and a God than they are to random chance. If you have to get them books or anything like that. In fact, if you want, I have a real good book that you should take some time. It's called "Is Atheism Dead?" by Eric Metaxas. Great book. If you want to read more about everything I talked about tonight, even about the archaeology in the Bible it goes into, gives you a lot more detail. Any other questions? Well, here's the problem. There's two types of evolution, micro and macro. Micro is true. Blood types are microevolution, changes in blood type to adapt to the environment that we were in at the time. Adaptation in skin color is microevolution. That's true, but macroevolution, where we descended from monkeys, is not true. And there's no proof of that. There's nothing that shows that ever happened. One of the cool things that science is doing too is just by little asides, they're proving what the Bible says. Now, the Bible says that God is the Alpha and the Omega, okay? It also says God is light. Now, Einstein proved that the closer we get to the speed of light, time slows down. At the speed of light, there is no time. So if God is light, for God, there is no time. Therefore, he can be the Alpha and the Omega. He can see the beginning and the end at the same time. I don't think they thought when they proved that time stops at the speed of light, that they were actually proving what the statements were in the Bible, but it works out pretty cool. Any more questions? If you think of some, you see me in church on Sunday, come up and ask me. I thank you all for coming. I hope I gave you some information that kind of loaded your brain so that you're armed to fight the fight. And it is a fight. And it's going to continue because it's not a science that we're fighting. It's another religion. Evolution has become a religion, a state religion. And we need to fight it. And we need to be passionate about it. Can we bow our heads for a moment of prayer before we close? Lord, we thank you for bringing us here together to share our thoughts and to expand our knowledge about this beautiful, wonderful universe and world that you've given to us, Lord. And we understand that your hand is in every single piece of it, that you're there guiding, directing, comforting, holding us together, our very being together. We thank you for that. In Jesus' wonderful name, amen. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you. And remember the rat trap. Irreducible structure.
said, ask him if he believes in 6-day creation.
Okay. Remember I said about God being outside of time? If you look at Genesis,